Welcome to episode 79 of the LOTD Pod, the Left of the Dial podcast. The Time Worm by Richard Shirk brings us in. That's my co-host. I am Flick, and you are?
Hey, this is Richard Shirk from Oakland, California, speaking to you from Mercury Capsule Studio. And that was my one of the singles from my new album. The new album is called With Clairvoyance. So yeah, thanks Sean for inviting me back and for playing that tune. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you.
As it is a pleasure to hang out with you. And this week we are hanging out and talking about secret weapons on the LOTD Pod. Secret weapons being the key to the songs that we have on our respective playlists, but maybe people you don't know by name. They are, we're not talking about the featured artists on the list, not the name that sells the records per se, but really the ones doing the heavy lifting in these cases.
Can I do sports for a second?
Sure. Are you going to give us scores, or what are you doing?
I kind of think about this as in Oakland. I first started following the Warriors after a while in, I think, like 2013, 2014, when they had this like kind of scrawny baby-faced player that would come out every once in a while and just like rain 3-pointers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started watching basketball again, like pretty hardcore, as did my girlfriend, now my wife, Susan. And I'd be like, oh, the secret weapon, Steph Curry.
Yeah, the secret didn't last very long.
No, it didn't. It got out. So when I was putting this list together, I still watched lots of basketball, and I was like, who is the Steph Curry of...
Since Steph Curry isn't much of a secret, I guess what I would compare it to is, for those that followed the Bulls back in their heyday, Craig Hodges was that guy shooting the threes off the bench. So maybe more Craig Hodges, right?
Yeah. I'll go with that. But anyway, I really like the idea of this radio show because in the bands that we know and love, there's inevitably someone who's just like totally key and often like more or less unknown.
Right. Yeah. And deserving of the spotlight. And that's what we're going to try and right that wrong today. Maybe that's overplaying it a bit, but I think everybody on our list deserves more attention than they've received in their careers.
Agreed. So should we jump in, or do we have any other orders of business to announce to our listeners?
I think we can jump into this. Do you want me to lead off, or do you want to go first?
I think I'll start.
Okay.
I love big band music. Sean, you feel the same way?
Maybe not so much the same way, but I don't dislike it, I guess.
Huh. Okay. Well, one of my favorite artists in that particular genre is Duke Ellington and his orchestra. You know them from Take the A Train and, like probably a dozen other songs that we could put on our official LOTD pod available on Spotify. And
that's right. Yeah.
Easy to find. But one of my favorites that I've been listening to is called Chelsea Bridge, and I think this really underscores the importance of our first kind of unsung musical secret weapon, Billy Strayhorn. Flick, you know Billy Strayhorn?
I don't.
Okay, well, so Duke Ellington and his orchestra were around for kind of a long time before they met. Billy Strayhorn met Duke Ellington in 1938. Band had been playing for probably about a decade by then. and he is just a kid. I think he's like 18 or something, and he comes up to Duke Ellington uh, in the same kind of way that you come up to an artist as a fan, and normally you kind of get the obligatory brush off and cold handshake. But Billy Strayhorn came up and he's like, you should really rearrange one of your big hits. You're doing it wrong. And Duke Ellington says, meet me in my studio in New York in 4 days. And that's really cool. And they become partners in music for 30 years. And the arrangements, the co-compositions for most of it, a lot of the memorable tunes, you can really trace it back to Billy Strayhorn. Aside from being a musical genius, he was a big part of the civil rights movement, friend of MLK, and also openly gay. And so he's just, an awesome guy and a real, trailblazer in a lot of different ways. Duke Ellington proves himself to be a stand-up guy by fighting for a lot of journalists and others to co-credit Strayhorn. It's so easy to be like, well, it's Duke Ellington tune, but he really stepped in and insisted that Billy get the credit that he deserves. Got a quote for you from Duke Ellington regarding Billy Strayhorn after Billy Strayhorn died in 1967. Duke Ellington says, Billy Strayhorn was my right arm, my left arm, all the eyes in the back of my head, my brain waves in his head, and his in mine. So great collaboration, lasted for 30 years.
Yeah, and that gets to the core of what I think my thinking was in wanting to do this show was the idea that like in this case Duke Ellington's making the point to give Billy Strayhorn the credit. That is what so often is not the case, and I won't say that so much as far as the artist goes, because I think most of the artists that we're featuring they will probably be sure to credit the musicians playing behind them, but often the record labels, the executives are not so big on that. Like they're big on the names that sell the records, and everybody else might be an interchangeable part. I think our ears tell us differently, though.
Oh yeah.
And an example of that here. Okay, so to preface this, like we all know Phil Spector was an absolutely horrible person. So I don't know that we really need to relitigate that.
The chat is blowing up, and everyone's like, "Totes, dude."
Yeah, we know that he was not a good guy, and I am not here to credit Phil Spector. Like we all know his work. We all know the merits of his production, and we all know what kind of horrible person he was. But what we maybe don't know is who else was making the recordings what they were. And I think we could probably do a whole show on the Wrecking Crew, the session musicians that were doing the instrumentation on his works.
Shout out to Carol Kay.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean the list goes on. It's a lot of musicians, and even your Darlene Loves don't get the credit that they deserve. And that was kind of the Spector way. Like everybody knew about the Wall of Sound. They didn't know what the parts were that were making up the Wall of Sound. Actually, and you mentioned Carol Kay, and she deserves a lot of credit here as well. The musician that I'm focusing on for this and the song that I'm using is "Be My Baby," which of course was a monumental moment in popular music. As what really inspired a lot of great Brian Wilson works, among a lot of other things. It inspired the Byrds to come up with their sound as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just Southern California alone, uh, just was an explosion coming from this. The shockwaves coming off of this song. But Hal Blaine on drums is who I want to focus on here.
Hal Blaine, yeah, represent. Yeah.
Yeah, who just as far as drumming goes, this is just like there's a lot I can isolate from this track about great musicianship here and everything else. But as far as drumming goes, this is one of my favorite all-time performances, drumming-wise, ever in music history, by Hal Blaine. Hal Blaine, who his birth name is Harold Simon Belsky, so better known as Hal Blaine, but not super well known. I don't know how many people know the man by name, but yeah, among all of the other things that made this such a lightning bolt in music history, I think Hal Blaine's drumming is right up there. It's just it's contained but yet explosive. It's very appropriate, but also very showy isn't the word, but I want to, for lack of a better word, showy, but yet very appropriate, I guess, is what I'll go with.
And this tune, the internet tells me 1963. Is that right?
Yeah, let me go back to that. It was August 1963.
So yeah, a fun thing I mentioned that because in so many of these like perfect, late 50s, early 60s tunes, just the equipment that you're using at the time is, I'm not going to say like primitive, but it's pretty basic. So you've got to have that sound like in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's what I always think about with this kind of thing with Motown. It's just the magic has to be there, and then you've got to flip on. You probably have like 4 tracks to work with if you're in a pretty fancy studio at the time.
Yeah, and I think this would have been this would have been at Gold Star Studios in Hollywood, so definitely a state of the art recording studio at the time. How about this, if it's accurate? Recorded in one day on July 5th of 1963, and then released a month later.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's a landmark track in rock history, and Hal Blaine played a big part in that. But yeah, I mean we could definitely do a whole show on the Wrecking Crew as well.
Oh yes, please. And remind me of, there's a great documentary, and I think, is it just called The Wrecking Crew?
Yes.
I invite people to definitely check that out if you're interested in a very well-made documentary about some of the cool people that made the hits that we all know and love.
Yeah, I think I might be wrong about this. I think you might be able to watch that for free on YouTube right now. So,
ooh, you should do that.
Yeah.
Neat.
If not, find a maybe pay whatever you have to pay to watch it if it's not free. But it's definitely worth it.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Yep.
So we're kind of bouncing around stylistically this week. Are you cool with that, Sean?
Sure. I'm always cool with that.
I know. I did. One of the many things I like about hanging out in a Mercury Capsule studio and doing these shows. So you probably know this song, and you've heard it too many times, but I invite you to take a fresh listen to the tune "In Your Eyes" by Peter Gabriel.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm gonna just wait here for 5 minutes and 30 seconds while you do that. Then I'll come back.
I mean, at this point, I can probably just play it back in my head.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think.
Huge hit, and I think, like a lot of people, for a long time, I kind of had a hard time listening to it because it was such a big hit. That whole album is pretty much such a big hit, but coming back to it as an older person, because I'm 40, right? Coming back to it with fresh ears, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and realize that it's just a really interesting album. The songwriting is really interesting. I've always loved Peter Gabriel's voice. It's such a weird voice. The way that he can jump from kind of a gravelly uh, thing to this perfect falsetto within the space of with no space at all. It's uh, I can't think of another singer. The only other singer that I think is kind of close in that phrasing is Hank Williams. Um, but I digress. I'm getting off topic. In Your Eyes, massive hit, but great song. And at the end of the song, there is some crazy kind of world beat singing. And I think, like a lot of people, I always wonder, like, who is that? I really want to get that story. And that is the singing of Yusu Indoor, who is singing in his native language of Wolof. Um, he is a
See,
Senegalese. Yeah, go ahead.
see, and I will just point out, like I haven't heard this song in. I honestly haven't heard this song probably in at least a decade, but I can remember that whole singing part that you're talking about right now. So
Yeah, it's so memorable. The song is so epic. And then at the end, there's this real release of when Yusu Indoor comes in and sings the translated lyrics, and kind of, I always thought it was kind of more related to maybe a Middle Eastern tradition of ecstatic singing, like with
mhm.
Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And I think I was a little bit confused because I know that Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, who everyone should look up anyway, has worked with Peter Gabriel and released albums on Peter Gabriel's label that he had for a while. But not true. This is from the Senegalese Gambian tradition. The particular genre is called mbalax, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong, but I I definitely wanted to give it a try. Um, and Youssou is one of the most famous singers in Senegal and West Africa, and throughout much of Africa, he is widely known as being one of the best singers ever, and also another person who has very distinct and accomplished history in opposing apartheid and fighting for the rights of the oppressed. So, stand up dude, and we know from this track and many others, an awesome singer. He adds that magic something to this tune, and now we know his name and we know his story.
All right. I for my second one, I'm kind of gonna keep it in a similar area than where I started with Hal Blaine. This isn't going to be a list full of drummers. I will come back to the drums at one point, and and I seriously, like the way my list was starting out, I was thinking, should I just try to make it all drummers? But this won't be all drummers.
Can I suggest that if you do that, you have to go to you have to make the playlist of only the isolated drum tracks.
Well, if we're gonna do that, then we have to go with more of a named drummer because to me the all-time isolated drum track is the John Bonham isolated drums on When the Levee Breaks. And
I'll take your word for it. As you know,
yeah,
I am Led Zeppelin deficient.
yeah. Well, we're still working on that.
We're working on it. I'm a work in progress.
But yeah, I mean, John Bonham, not a secret weapon. I think the world knows John Bonham.
Yeah, I think we know that guy.
And the world knows, yes, the band, but maybe they don't know Alan White or Alan White by name. Alan White was, in Yes as a drummer. I'm not focusing on a Yes track here. The track I'm actually focusing on is John Lennon's Instant Karma, or as it's sometimes known, We All Shine On. Similar to Hal Blaine, this is why I put these two back to back. It's similar type of sound, similar type of drumming, and also somewhat similar to Keith Moon as well. Just very, but with Keith Moon, you are always very aware of it being Keith Moon. I think here, if you're not really focused on the drums, you don't realize how much is going on. Like I think with him and Hal Blaine, with Alan White here and Hal Blaine on Be My Baby, there's, like they really pulled off this sort of thing where everything sounds very appropriate, but it's also very busy, and busy doesn't sound like the most artistic word. It is though very much an achievement. Like it really elevates the song. I think if you took this song and put different drumming tracks behind it that were maybe more subtle, maybe or understated, and maybe just more traditional, I don't think it would be half the song that it ends up being. So to me, Alan White really makes this track, and it's another great ensemble playing behind Lennon on this.
I love reading the liner notes on John Lennon solo records of the 70s and 80s, because you never know who's going to show up. It's so cool.
Yeah, George Harrison, in addition to everybody else, George Harrison is on this track. Billy Preston's on this track. It has two of the four Beatles, and Klaus Voormann, who's better known as the artist behind the cover art of the Beatles' Revolver, and produced by Phil Spector. So we're back, and again, Phil Spector is a horrible person, absolutely awful, just horrible.
Alan Klein, I'm seeing he has like a backing vocal credit, and you've got Mal Evans. If you're really into the Beatles, Mal Evans, of course, as one of the OG road crew. Yeah, and
Yoko on backing vocals. If you're a Beatles fan, you're also familiar with that name.
Of course.
She played a part in the Beatles history.
Yeah. I love Instant Karma so much. I'm so glad you are talking about this song, because the spontaneity in this tune and the positivity of what he's singing about it is just, it's a magic tune. It's one of my favorites by him.
Yeah, and again, Phil Spector was an awful human being.
Well, that can be the whole show next week, okay, Sean?
Yeah, but, I just just in case you think that we're not aware that he was, he did some things as a producer that are noteworthy. But was a horrible human. So, not excusing it.
No, of course not. No. I think if you were to try and compile a list of songs where everyone involved, especially in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where everyone involved was like a stand-up guy, it would be a short list,
That's true.
Yeah. Just
don't want to justify it. He was a horrible human.
Agreed. Cool pick. Do you have anything else you want to mention about this track?
No, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Alan
Great.
White, though,
Oh,
just to recap who we're talking about, just in case
Alan White.
you thought it was really about Phil Spector. It's about Alan White. Alan
No, no,
White,
yeah, yeah.
great drumming here.
Although, we bring up Klaus Vormann. I love Klaus, and uh, yeah, maybe I regret not thinking of including him on my jams, but
Well,
instead I go ahead. Yeah.
definitely when we have a playlist of the best all time album cover art, Klaus Vormann definitely is right there.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, for my next tune, I bring you the absolute genius of a gentleman named Bernie Worrell. You've heard Bernie Worrell in various Funkadelic and Parliament tunes. He gets his start playing with George Clinton and P Funk. I selected, maybe just because I've been listening to a lot of Talking Heads right now, but he also shows up on pretty much all of the Talking Heads albums of the 1980s. And I selected Cross-Eyed and Painless, the live version from the epic, unstoppable live album and concert film Stop Making Sense. Bernie is a genius, and I mean that in like a whole bunch of different ways. So he began piano lessons at age 3 and composed his first concerto at age 8. Attended Juilliard, and then in the 70s met George Clinton, and history was made. This guy has chops, but I have some experience in the music biz in the classical world, right? And I feel like one of the tragedies of some performers in that space is that they're extremely uh, technically proficient and are wonderful interpreters of these hugely complex and sometimes weird pieces of the canon. But when you ask them to play without anything in front of them, sometimes you get a blank stare, you know? So I love that Bernie Worrell has that kind of training, but is a real masterful improviser and experimenter in the 70s and 80s, especially with uh, Moog and synthesizer technologies that are just coming out, just barely available for people who don't work at like Bell Labs or NASA or something. So really funky, really weird. You can pick it out instantly in any record that he's on. These squiggly, interesting, funky keyboard lines, and he brings so much to the incarnation of the Talking Heads that are featured on this album and concert film. And he also shows up on quite a few awesome records in the 1980s, and also on a Fela Kuti record, which I didn't know, on 1985's Army. Oh, I can't read my own writing. That's so weird. Army Arrangement, I think. Yeah. So Bernie Worrell, strange, interesting guy, so talented. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to double up here because I want to stay with the Talking Heads for a bit,
Yes,
but
please.
I don't want to start with the Talking Heads proper. I want to go back to so first I want to talk about Jerry Harrison, who before he was in the Talking Heads was in a band called the Modern Lovers. Also, Talking Heads very near and dear to my heart, but Modern Lovers just as much, if not more, near and dear to my heart. A band that I think is most known for Jonathan Richman, but also featured Jerry Harrison on keyboards. And
You got to call him JoJo if you really love him.
okay, JoJo. being Jonathan Richman. Um, the signature track, I think it's fair to say, of the Modern
Roadrunner.
Lovers, Roadrunner. Like if you don't know anything else, you probably know Roadrunner. And of course, Jonathan Richman is a big reason why Roadrunner and all of the Modern Lovers tracks are what they are. Like he's a very iconoclastic sort of rock and roller. He might not be for everybody's taste, but if you lock in on what he's putting down, I think. Well, anyway, that's maybe a different conversation because we're talking about Jerry Harrison. But in addition to what Jonathan Richman, JoJo, does on the track, that makes it such a classic track. I think the keyboard playing by Jerry Harrison is, every bit as essential. And he even gets a solo a bit on the keyboards here.
Oh, yes, he does. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so cool. I love
yeah, and how often do you even get that on keyboards? But yeah, you have to give the keyboard some on this one, and he did. And yeah, so just an iconic track, and in addition to what Jonathan Richman did on it, Jerry Harrison, I think, equally important, and which is saying something, because so that's the first track I want to feature here, but I want to stay with the Talking Heads, a track that Jerry Harrison was a part of later, but not featuring or not making Jerry Harrison the focus of the conversation on this. When we're talking about secret weapons, like to me, one of the all-timers is Tina Weymouth on bass for the Talking Heads. I mean, I could definitely go if I really want to hit home with an example of what makes Tina Weymouth such an important part of what the Talking Heads were doing. Just think about Psycho Killer and think about the bass intro to that and how big and important that is. But just to kind of keep it going along the lines with the keyboards as well, I want to go with Life During Wartime, and it also happens to be my favorite all-time Talking Heads track.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Wow.
So, that's also important in including this here. But yeah, Tina Weymouth, her bass playing is always super essential in the Talking Heads stuff. But I also love how the whole band, Jerry Harrison and Tina Weymouth and everybody else really in the pocket here. And it really makes the track what it is. It bangs and it slaps, as they say.
As they say in the biz.
As they say in the biz.
Yeah.
So the banging and the slapping, big part due to Tina Weymouth and Jerry Harrison. So get a little twofer on that one for Secret Weapons.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Jerry Harrison. I think if you've never heard the tune Roadrunner by Modern Lovers, like just pause our widely followed and awesome podcast, LOTD Pod, and go check it out. It'll, if you've never heard it, I guarantee that it'll do something to you.
Yeah, I mean, and if you've never heard the Modern Lovers version, maybe you've heard the Sex Pistols do it, or Joan Jett, or whoever. If you haven't heard it from the source, you need to go to the source on that one.
Yeah, it's exuberant and
life affirming.
Totally, exactly, and totally unique at the time, and yeah, that keyboard solo just puts it right over the edge. Oh, and if you think that you want to play guitar but you think you can't, you can play Roadrunner. It's I believe it is just E and A, and you play it with gusto, and you got it. Start there and then write your own tunes. So yeah, I also love that the Modern Lovers are such an incubator for so many cool people that go on to do interesting things. So Yeah, Jerry Harrison for sure is I the missing component for the Talking Heads, who at the time before Jerry Harrison joins the band were kind of an interesting but thin sounding trio of David Byrne, Chris Frantz, and Tina Weymouth. And he is invited to join the band, but he says, call me back when you've got a record deal. And so they get signed to Sire, and they call him back, and I think he says, okay, well, call me back when you're actually ready to record something, and but then yeah, he really adds so much to the group. Tina Weymouth and Chris Frantz, in many ways, according to who you talk to, are the founding members of Talking Heads. I invite everyone to not only watch Stop Making Sense at least once a year, but if you want to, check out the book Remain in Love by Chris Frantz, which has just come out in the past year or so. Really details the origins of the band and how much those two really contribute to the sound and the direction of Talking Heads.
Well, so this is, I didn't prepare this, but this is the story as I recall it, and I might be off.
Go for it.
But isn't it that that David Byrne and Chris Frantz were working on songs, and then basically talked Tina, because Tina Weymouth was Chris Frantz's girlfriend at the time, right?
Yeah.
And talked her into playing bass just because, like she was available. And then she just ends up being like this total kick-ass bass player. I don't know if I have that story right or not, but that's the story as I understand it.
Yeah, and then they all end up in New York. So that era of kind of like the prehistory of Talking Heads takes place at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. Shout out to Ian McNamara. And then they all end up in New York in the mid 70s, and they're not really playing music anymore. So, and it's kind of Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth who are like, we should form a band. Who do we know? Let's call David.
Okay.
They talk to David, and he's like, I guess so. Okay, if you guys are into it. And that is disputed, depending on which side of the story you get. So take that with a grain of salt for sure. But yeah, definitely so much musicality brought by that pair, and also Jerry Harrison. Tina Weymouth and Chris Frantz also go on to have a really interesting producing career. So you've probably heard some of their jams, and it's not just some of the stuff they did in the 90s, like the band Live, but it's Ziggy Marley and like really interesting funky stuff. That's
all right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. and yeah. All right. And what is your next entry?
Okay. This one, Sean, one of the many things I like about you is how non-judgmental you are.
I try.
And I'm really pushing you on this one. Maybe.
If this is going where I think it's going, yeah, this is going to push the boundaries. This is going to push me to the limits.
Okay, and that's one of my character faults. I do push boundaries sometimes, so I acknowledge that. I am in non-defensive mode. I invite you to take a fresh listen to the song Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty.
Yeah.
And I bet
is it possible to take a fresh listen to that song?
Well, yeah, I think it is, because okay, let's see what's going on in the chat. Oh, no one knows that it's called Baker Street. Everyone thinks it's called na 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 na. And it is like always over 80s car chases, right? It's the sax solo song that you always hear. Um, it's Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. Kind of an interesting tune because it doesn't really hang on that riff too long, but when it does, it really cooks. Am I wrong?
I would say to me, this is like, I don't know if this is officially in the genre of yacht rock, but
I
this
think it's one of
definitely.
the. I think it's one of the pillars.
Okay, that's what I would assume, but not sure. Yeah, I mean, to me, it definitely has that flavor. And yeah, it's a yeah, it's not my jam. It's not my jam.
Yeah, we can have this not be a mutual jam. I was totally oblivious to who actually sang this song, or that there was any other part to the song other than the saxophone solo for the longest time. And then I've got a friend named Rick. Rick, if you're listening, how you doing? Um, who is a few years older than me. He could probably be my dad, actually, but he's not. And his hobby is that he's one of the all-time like gifted musicians that I've ever known. His hobby is to go out to the shed and re-record like note by note Beatles covers and other tunes that he likes, in addition to his own tunes. And one that he recorded was by Jerry Rafferty, and he played the song for me at our workplace where we worked together. And I had no idea who that was. And then he's like, "Oh, you probably know him from that song with the sax solo." And I checked it out, and it was actually a pretty interesting song. And the secret weapon in the song is obviously the saxophone line, and that's what I'm here to talk about for my presentation. And that saxophone is played by a gentleman named Raphael Ravenscroft, who you've heard. I guarantee you've heard this guy and a bunch of other 70s and 80s tunes. And I want to tell you a little story that he was able to come to peace with this tune. He was paid £27 for the studio session, and he went to cash the check, and the check bounced. About a year later, Jerry Rafferty is making £80,000 a year just from royalties on this song.
Mm,
Ouch! That
yeah,
hurts.
there you go.
But he came to his peace with it, and when Jerry Rafferty died, he was invited to play at the memorial, and when Raphael Ravenscroft died, he was widely honored not only for this killer saxophone solo, which makes me want to like be in an 80s car chase in Miami, uh, but also for his work with like Everyone Cool. So he worked with Pink Floyd as a session guy. He worked with ABBA. He worked with Marvin Gaye. He worked with Daft Punk. So next time you hear that jam, pour one out for Raphael Ravenscroft.
I will do that. All right, my next track. Another drummer. We're going back to the drummers now.
Of course.
And one of my absolute favorites. But not somebody you know by name, and that's why he's on this list. Pete Thomas of the Attractions.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, he's like since the relationship with Elvis Costello began, he's, I think, worked with him probably more than any other musician. That's not well researched, but I think that's correct. I think Elvis Costello has called on Pete Thomas more than anybody else that he works with.
I'd say a close second, or perhaps equally tied, would be Steve Naive.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Steve Naive, also of the Attractions, and Steve Naive was on the first Elvis Costello record, at least on Watching the Detectives. I'm not sure if he was on any other tracks, but
I believe the majority of that record, "My Aim Is True," is played by the Clovers, who are we're kind of, I think they're from Sausalito, so my neck of the woods over here in California, and they kind of turn into Huey Lewis and the News. Fun fact.
well, I think they turned into the News more than Huey Lewis, or was Huey Lewis? Huey Lewis wasn't on the album, right? It was just
I think he, I looked
News.
this up once about 15 years ago, and I think he plays like harmonica or something
Oh, okay.
on some of the backing tracks. So it's kind of like one of those things where you see that Phil Collins is in the liner notes for like a Brian Eno, like super weird art record. It's cool. It's cool.
So anyway, Pete Thomas, like the second Elvis Costello album is an Elvis Costello and the Attractions album, this year's model.
Oh yes.
And from the jump, the first thing you hear is Elvis Costello's voice on the beginning of No Action. But then it comes in, Pete Thomas is the next thing you hear, and then it's Steve Naive on the keyboards. And I mean, really, like immediately the impact of the Attractions is known. Like the first, My Aim Is True, the first album, is a great album, a good songs and everything. But the force of the Attractions when that comes in on No Action is just immediate. It just
it's
grabs you.
Yeah, it's so good.
And No Action is the track that I'm featuring here for Pete Thomas. There's just so many, I think his presence is always felt when he's a part of the collaboration. But featuring No Action here, and Pete Thomas, I absolutely love.
Yeah, a classic. The Attractions are probably like one of the tightest backing bands I could really think of, and wow, so cool. And even, there's like that punk rock, really electric crack of the drums kind of style, but there's some subtlety in there too. Especially as we get into like later albums like All This Useless Beauty.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pete Thomas, like the other drummers, that I talked about already, I think they all exhibit this ability to be a force, but yet be tasteful at the same time. They're not overplaying, but they're playing big, but not overplaying.
Right on, man. Love it. Yeah, one of my all-time favorite groups for sure. And another group that you may have heard of that you may like?
Yes.
It's the Beatles. Oh yeah. So
I've heard of them.
Oh yes, the Beatles. I'm bringing like all the pop stuff this week, buddy. So the story that you probably know, which is, really true, is that towards the end, it was tough to be in the Beatles.
I heard that.
Yeah, it was, to be in the most successful band, the most famous band in the world. You have no anonymity. You're locked in a room with 3 other guys, and then at the later point, they all want different managers and stuff. It's kind of a toxic situation. And in 1969, George Harrison says, I'm done. So I think he goes to a Ray Charles concert and sees this guy playing keys. It's like, I think that would be a really cool addition that would, get us through what we're recording now. They were recording Let It Be, and it was kind of stuck. And the person who was playing keyboards for Ray Charles is Billy Preston. And that same night, he brings him to the studio. And Billy Preston plays a big role on the last 2 Beatles records. And he keeps the group together. The way that I've heard it described, I think maybe by Macca, is that everyone's on their best behavior when someone new has come over to tea. So um, not only does he play that role, but he's also pretty talented keyboard player. I think we can all agree on that. So not only does he start to play in Little Richard's backing band when he's 16, but he goes on to play with Ray Charles, as I mentioned, but also with Sam Cooke, Everly Brothers, and the Rolling Stones. Fun piece of trivia from the internet. Billy Preston is one of only 5 musicians credited other than the Fab Four. So here's a fun puzzle for you, Sean, but also for our listeners. Who are the other 5 musicians that are credited other than the Fab Four?
Okay, on this track?
Just over the course of the Beatles.
Oh, over the course of the Beatles.
Can I give you the first one?
Sure.
Eric Clapton.
Okay, yeah, on the White Album.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and I just to let you know, I don't know the answer to this. So this is a fun, participatory adventure for you, me, and the 10,000 people listening right now.
yeah, that isn't so easy. It's just not as easy as would George Martin ever be credited as a musician?
Yes, he would. That's the only other person I could kind of summon into my brain. So I'm going to research that and stay tuned, listeners, because next week I'll unveil the full list of all the 5 people who were not the Fab Four that were credited on Beatles records.
Yeah, and George. So Billy Preston often gets called the fifth Beatle, perhaps because of what you said about being like a positive presence at a time where things were crumbling. For me, George Martin is the fifth Beatle. I don't know, maybe Billy Preston would be the sixth, but
yeah,
George
totally. I would say you could make the argument for there being 7 Beatles.
Well, yeah, and you could also say if you're going to talk about Pete Best and Stu Sutcliffe and
no. I think, and what I meant was yes and. But yeah, I mean the role that Brian Epstein plays in the formation of the band, that is huge. But yeah, totally. Musically, George Martin brings so much to the group.
Yeah,
and really is involved in the self-actualization of Paul McCartney as a musical juggernaut.
Yeah, I mean, without Brian Epstein, they might have been a very small-time act. People, like they might have never crossed over to America. They might not have ever even crossed over to London, possibly.
Yeah, they might still be in Hamburg.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of bearing the lead here because the tune that I picked out, which is very easy to find on Spotify, on the LOTD Pod public playlist called Secret Weapons, LOTD Pod number 79, is Don't Let Me Down. And I always like that tune. I love it's such a great message that shows up time and time again in pop tunes. A lot of pop tunes are Girl, I Like You, Girl, Don't Leave Me. But I think almost all of the Don't Let Me Down tunes are about friendship. And I think that kind of ties together a lot of what we're talking about. That sometimes you can, if you're in a fraught situation with your friends, sometimes if you're in polite company, you can kind of reframe everything.
Yeah, it's a track also a lot like a lot like other tracks from that session, those sessions. Like Two of Us and I Got a Feeling that even though things were apparently crumbling at the time, they still had that great chemistry in their recordings. So that was never an issue. They always had that in the recordings.
Yeah, the Beatles. Check them out.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
They're pretty
Pretty
good.
good.
Thank you,
You,
Sean. Thank you for
you
indulging me.
you might know a couple of their hits, but um, yeah. So okay, so the next track. Okay, so we have somebody in common, somebody else. Well,
There
I
is some
guess
overlap. Yes.
yeah. So I guess let's finish off with that. Do you have anybody else on your list though?
Yeah. I wanted to talk about an Australian guitarist,
Oh,
uh, but named
well,
Rowan S. Howard. But I want to hand it over to you first.
okay, because I still want to take my turn. I didn't know if you had just that one person on your list that we had in
I
common.
thought you were just, you're like, what else is this guy going to bring me other than the Beatles? And
Yeah.
Jerry Rafferty. Yeah.
Okay, so two more on my list, two more on your list. So I just wanted to see where that stood, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Bob Dylan, he's been known to have good musicians that like playing with him. There's a lot, like I think we'll come back to this topic every now and then. So I think we'll get to talk about, or I'll definitely choose to talk about some of those. We could maybe even do a whole show on those.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to throw out, names like, Mike Bloomfield and Al Cooper and
even Daniel Lanois later on.
right, who also produced. Yeah, so one that you might not be so familiar with, but you definitely know her playing, Scarlett Rivera, who was featured very prominently on the Desire album, and part of the Rolling Thunder Review.
I love Desire. That's such a great record. I wouldn't say it's overlooked because I don't think anything Dylan has done is like truly overlooked.
Yeah, you might have heard of that guy.
But I'd say it's like slightly neglected.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, but even if you don't really know the album so well, you probably know Hurricane as a track, and her violin playing on that really is, I mean, there's so many parts to the engine there. Maybe she's the carburetor though. It's such a key part of that song. You take it out and it just doesn't have the same kind of teeth, even though that's a very toothy song. Scarlett Rivera is my penultimate secret weapon on my list for her work on Desire, but featured here on the track Hurricane by Bob Dylan.
I think that album has kind of this Western feel to it. And so I'd almost say that she's playing fiddle. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, there isn't really any difference between violin playing and fiddle. Well, I mean, the style of playing, perhaps, but it is the same instrument. Am I wrong?
No, you are 110% correct.
Yeah, because like seriously, that's one of those things you always wonder: is there any difference between what is referred to as a fiddle and what is a violin? But yeah, one more cup of coffee. Yeah, one more cup of coffee. Tracks like that, they would be very much at home in like a more a 70s style Western, I guess.
Yeah, and I was just going to talk about that. What year is Desire from?
76. Yeah, released January 76.
Okay, because I guess part of my most recent theory about the album Desire is that it was kind of informed by Dylan co-starring or being featured in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid.
I don't know if, because that's going back a couple. Blood on the Tracks is what precedes Desire. Pat Garrett would be two back, I think, or so.
Yeah, so that was 72. And if you haven't seen that film, it's a really weird, cool anti-Western in some ways. Sam Peckinpah, 1972.
the album cover of Desire definitely has looks like it could be a movie poster for a 70s Western as well.
Yeah. And yeah, that album has such a feel to it, and so much of it is completely pegged on that fiddle sound. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really cool.
Sure.
Yeah. Let's see. For my penultimate tune, I've got a really weird one. Some of you may like it, some of you may not. But one of my favorite artists, again, a polarizing guy, is Nick Cave. And before Nick Cave was just Nick Cave, or Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, he was in a totally punk rock, interesting group called the Birthday Party. Starting out in Australia, moving to London, moving to Berlin. The secret weapon of the Birthday Party was Roland S. Howard. Roland S. Howard, we've talked about before regarding the tune Shivers, which he wrote when he was 16. He has such a distinct guitar style. It's loud and, obviously heavily treated with weird effects that are like feeding back on themselves. And it's really spooky, dark, interesting stuff. Not to everyone's taste. Uh, and the tune that I've featured is called "The Friend Catcher" from the album Hee Haw by the Birthday Party, which was just re-released on vinyl, on groovy red vinyl, actually. Roland S. Howard is a guitar genius and also a great band leader in his own right. So goes on after a Birthday Party breakup to be in These Immortal Souls and also in Crime and the City Solution, which a lot of people are aware of as being the spooky weird band in Wim Wenders' 1987 film Wings of Desire. He died at age 50, tragically young, of liver cancer. If you want to know more, definitely check out this tune, and also check out a documentary called Autoluminescence.
Okay, and our ultimate, we have a mutual ultimate on our list, and I think that's appropriate because for me anyway, this is maybe the first person I think of when I think of this subject. That would be Mick Ronson, who was the longtime lead guitarist in. Well, he was the lead guitarist in the Spiders of Mars. That was, of course, the backing band for David Bowie for a number of years, and very prominent on what I think a lot of people would say is like the ultimate era of the David Bowie career. Although there's so many good twists and turns to that career, but probably the classic period above all. Whether or not you agree, I think you can agree that's a pretty great run that David Bowie had. Going from Hunky Dory to ending up with Aladdin Sane.
Right. Yeah. And even though Spiders from Mars are not really,
Or I'm sorry, I misspoke. Man Who Sold the World up to Aladdin Sane.
yeah, there you go. Because there is definitely some Rano on Hunky Dory, and then Spiders from Mars. You kind of only get 4 albums out of Spiders from Mars with David Bowie. Is that right?
Yeah, but they're an amazing run of 4 records, though. A grand slam.
And those records are
so The Man Who Sold the World, Hunky Dory, the life or the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust, and Aladdin Sane.
I would also argue that approximately like half of Diamond Dogs and also Pinups.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you have the big four there, and then but that's not the end of the run, right?
It's these are some really classic records, and yeah, Ronald is not one of the things that I kind of found out recently about Mick Ronson is not only is he just like slaying on guitar, but a lot of the really delicate, intricate arrangements on these records and some other records that we're going to talk about very shortly are all Mick Ronson.
Mm.
He's in the studio. I think the story goes, and Sean, chime in if I'm wrong here, but pretty sure the story is that he is in the studio with Bowie, and they're doing some sort of arrangement. I think with Hunky Dory,
Well,
and
yeah, yeah. Just to throw it out as an example, because I think it really drives the point home. Life on Mars is the track that I think he most prominently arranges does the string arrangements on. Um, and it's just so essential to what that song is.
yeah, I think what I was trying to get at is, he. This is probably earlier now that I think about it, but he's in a session with Bowie with an arranger, and the arranger has to go somewhere, and they're not done yet. And so Mick Ronson's like, "I want to learn how to do what you do," and so he goes back. He's from Hull, England, and he goes back to Hull and learns how to arrange, like for the BBC orchestra in I think like a year,
Hmm.
and then brings that talent back to Spiders from Mars, and then also with some of the other tracks that get worked on during this time period, such as I think the tune that you're going to bring to the table.
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to go first because your track features him as a guitar player.
As
So
the guitar player. So yeah, I think
yeah,
that's a good point that you bring up, that uh kind of looping back to like, yeah, not only did he like destroy on guitar, but was a really talented arranger with a really deft touch. So
yeah,
when I think about Bowie, I think about some of my favorite Bowie tunes, and I've got a bunch of them, but Rebel Rebel is just everything I love about David Bowie, especially during this time period. And you couldn't have this song without Mick Ronson. Uh, it is fierce. Like the
mm.
guitars on this are just totally rocking. And again, if you've never heard Rebel Rebel, I'm kind of envious because you can hear it for the first time.
Yeah. Well, and just thinking about all of those tracks from that Bowie era that represent him well as a guitar player, just from that album, the Gene Genie. And then going back to Ziggy Stardust, you have the title track. You have Moon Age Daydream, which also is another good example of his arranging. With the all of that.
Whoa, you're good at whistling. Good for you, buddy.
Yeah, that's my best instrument. Um, yeah, so it just such a important part with the guitar. Like so many of those songs, to me anyway. His guitar playing was was as important as anything going on in that whole era. But then you go to him as an arranger, and I bet a lot of people know this track, but they don't know his role in it, and that would be "Perfect Day" by Lou Reed. Which and by the way, "Walk on the Wild Side" as well. The Transformer record. Mick Ronson was a producer along with David Bowie. They both produced, and Mick Ronson's doing the arrangement. But just thinking about the track "Perfect Day." Again, the "Walk on the Wild Side" is another great example of the arranging. But just how important those strings on "Perfect Day" are, and the piano part, the do 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 do
Yeah,
do,
nice.
and
Really.
and that's him. That's Mick Ronson. How many people even realize that? But how important is that to those songs?
Yeah, he was wow. He brought so much to the table on that album. You know, I mean, Bowie and Mick Ronson kind of wrote an album for Lou Reed and gave it to him.
Yeah, it's I don't know. He's to me maybe the he's ultimate guy on our list, and to me might be the ultimate secret weapon of all time in rock music.
Wow, yeah, you bring up such a good point because I mean he plays that role, and we've talked about this a little bit going back to our David Bowie draft, which is like I don't know, like episode 60 something. Um, Mick Ronson does so much for so many years all over the place. So yeah, I mean, he is responsible for the signature sound of David Bowie in the 70s during his classic, rise to fame. Uh, he also produces the very best Morrissey record, which is Your Arsenal, which I think is from 92 or maybe 91. Um, and he also is a killer in the studio as a producer and gives you some of the best Tina Turner hits from the mid 80s. So he has skills.
Yeah, he certainly did. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. Like we could do a Mick Ronson show for sure. All Rano.
All Rano. And yeah, I mean, that's such a great way to end it too, because yeah, ask the guy on the street who plays guitar on Starman, and you're not going to get that many answers. I mean,
Yeah, the thing is, there are probably many, at least moderate David Bowie fans, maybe even beyond moderate David Bowie fans, who probably don't know that name. That's I don't
ouch.
think that's a stretch.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a stretch.
Well, I
I
think we've also talked, and I'm gonna play the opposite side. There are many different kinds of David Bowie fans, so
Sure.
and that is not any, that's not a denigration, but yeah, I think that's a really good topic, and yeah, I would love to do a deep dive into because not only does he work on the tunes and albums that we just talked about, but he's also in Mott the Hoople
Mhm.
for an album or two. He's bringing it back to Dylan. He's in the Rolling Thunder Review um, for a while. So yeah, he knows everybody. He was, I think he. No, I'm crossing my music documentaries, but I think at one point he was under consideration to uh, join the Rolling Stones, and that may be completely apocryphal, and I may be mixing it up with Andy Summers, but these things happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not aware of that one, so
Huh.
I can't confirm or deny that.
Let's see if Keith is on the chat. No, he's going to listen to it in a replay, he says. Okay.
So it would have either been one of those guys or Ronnie Wood.
Yeah. So it was in
Okay.
that class of replacement guitarists for the Stones.
Huh. I don't know. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's do just a quick roundtable of some of the people that we wanted to talk about, but we just didn't get around to or didn't have time to.
Well, we could do that, or we could do another one of these down the road.
Yeah, I'd love to. I just want to give like quick shout outs. I'll go first. Bobby Keys.
Sure. Yeah. But we could just talk about Bobby Keys on a later show, though.
This
So
is supposed to be like the rapid fire fun part.
yeah, I want to save some of these. I want to do this again.
Okay.
I want to do this again.
I
There's
take it
plenty
back.
more to talk about. I mean, I'll just because you threw out a name, James Jamerson. So, you know, sneak preview.
Sneak preview.
I
Oh,
will
yeah.
probably be talking about James Jamerson at a future date.
Right on. Okay. I love it. Sean, this has been such a fun show. I love when you force me to do homework for these.
That's once a week, really.
I learned so much. I spend a lot of time on the internet, on Wikipedia, and listening to tunes that I don't really have a normal reason to go to, and it's always really fun. And I also want to say thank you to our many listeners who are out there. Always love hearing your feedback, and yeah, I'm glad it's you're definitely part of this thing.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, I guess maybe I'm a natural. Maybe I'm a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. This
You're
all
one of my
just
favorite nerds.
this all just comes natural
Yeah,
to me. It's
yeah, it's cool.
it's not really homework so much.
Um, with that, do you want to tell our listeners what we're up to next week?
I think next week we have agreed to talk about. We're gonna do a show called "It's Complicated," where we're going to talk about bands and artists we have a complicated relationship with. We like them, but not maybe love them, or maybe we love
Interesting.
them, but we don't want to admit that we love them,
You
or
love them, but you don't want to commit to them.
that too. Yeah.
Okay.
It's complicated.
Yeah, uh, and I don't think I'm going to reveal who I'm going to be talking about. We should leave that as kind of some
Yeah.
suspense, right?
Save that for later.
Okay, that's going to be a really fun show. Wow, any other news that we need to announce?
I think that's it. Yeah, join us next week for it. It's complicated.
That'll be show number 80. And again, you can find our official playlists that go along with this show on Spotify. Search for LOTD Pod. This week's show is under the playlist Secret Weapons, LOTD Pod number 79.
There you go.
That was my radio voice. But anyway, it's always a pleasure hanging out with you, Sean. You're such a nerd, and we love you for it. And
you want me to do my radio voice?
yeah, let's hear your radio voice.
All right. So this is like my right wing talk show guy voice.
Okay.
So I don't really have much to it, but Stephen Mnuchin. Hi. Did you hear about Stephen Mnuchin?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Wow, you just got invited to Mar-a-Lago. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway, from the Mercury Capsule recording studio.
Hear that voice or hear that name on the show.
From the Mercury Capsule recording studio in Oakland, California. This is Richard signing off. Sean, thanks for another fun episode of Left of the Dial.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.